What would you do if your own flesh and blood treated you like a dirty secret at your father's funeral? Whispered, "You're not welcome here," and shoved you to the back pew like some stranger who wandered in off the street. That's exactly what happened to me, Elena Thompson, at my dad Victor Hargrove's service. I walked into that old stone church feeling the weight of every stare. Up front, my half-siblings, Marcus, Lydia, and Derek, sat in the reserved family rows, heads high, pretending perfection. They wore their grief like designer labels, but I knew the truth. They'd spent years erasing me from the family picture after Mom left when I was 10, when the whispers about Dad's affair finally got too loud. I hadn't spoken to Victor in years, but he reached out in his final months. Secret letters, quiet apologies, promises of closure. I came for goodbye, not drama. Yet the second I tried to take a seat near them, Lydia's voice sliced through the organ music. "Not there. Back row. You're not sitting with us." I obeyed. Head down, heart pounding, slid into the last pew alone. But as everyone settled and the priest stepped to the pulpit, I caught him glancing straight at me. His face went pale. Something was wrong, and what he was about to say would blow their perfect little world apart. The moment I stepped through those heavy church doors, the whispers started, like knives sliding across silk. I could feel the eyes before I even looked up. Rows of black suits and veiled hats turning just enough to register me, then snapping forward again, as if I'd been a bad dream they could blink away. Up front, the real family occupied the first three pews like they owned the grief itself. Marcus, tall, polished, always the one Dad groomed to take over, sat center, jaw set like stone. Next to him, Lydia, lips pursed in that signature way she saves for when someone dares exist outside her approval. Derek, the youngest, just stared at his shoes, too weak to pick a side. I hadn't been invited to family dinners in over a decade. Not since Mom packed us up and left when the affair rumors hit critical mass. Dad never denied it, never fought for us. He just faded. Until those last few months, when the letters started arriving. Handwritten. Private. "Elena, you're still my daughter. Always were. Come say goodbye when the time comes." I kept everyone folded in my purse like fragile proof I mattered. So I came. I walked down the aisle, heels clicking too loud in the hush. Reached for the end of the family row. That's when Lydia leaned forward, voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. "Not there. Back row. You're not sitting with us." Marcus didn't even turn his head, just a tiny nod of agreement. Derek flinched but said nothing. Have you ever felt your own blood turn you invisible in the place you're supposed to belong? I swallowed the burn in my throat, nodded once, walked to the very last pew, sat alone. The organ swelled, drowning the murmurs. Everyone settled, but as the priest climbed the steps to the pulpit, his gaze swept the room and locked on me. His face drained of color, hands tightened on the Bible. Something was terribly wrong, and whatever he was about to read would make sure no one in that church ever forgot my name. Ever wonder how fast grief can turn into performance art? The priest cleared his throat and launched into the eulogy like he was reading from a script someone else wrote. Victor Hargrove was a devoted family man, a pillar of this community, a loving father to his children. Each word landed like a slap across my face. Loving father. Right. The same man who let my mother walk out with a 10-year-old girl while he built a shiny new family upstairs. I sat in the back, arms crossed tight, watching the front row show. Marcus nodding solemnly, every inch the grieving heir apparent. Lydia dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, Oscar-worthy. Derek just kept staring at the floor like he hoped it would swallow him before anyone asked him to speak. The contradictions piled up fast. They played the perfect mourners while I'd spent the last 15 years being the family footnote. Yet here I was, clutching Dad's final letter in my pocket like a lifeline. "Elena," it read in his shaky handwriting, "you're more my daughter than they know. Forgive me for the silence. The truth will come when I'm gone." I'd read it so many times the creases were wearing thin. Then the priest shifted gears. Before we proceed to the committal, Victor left specific instructions regarding his final wishes. He paused. flipped a page. His eyes flicked toward me again, quick, almost guilty. He started reading the names of the beneficiaries. Marcus, Lydia, Derek, the business, the house, the accounts, all the usual suspects. But when he got to the next line, his voice cracked. He said, and an additional heir no one expected. The entire church seemed to lean forward at once. My heart slammed against my ribs. He looked straight at me, swallowed hard, and that's when the real storm began brewing, because what came next would turn their grief into something far uglier. What happens when the one secret everyone tried to bury gets dragged into the light in front of God, family, and a packed church? The priest stood frozen at the pulpit, the single sheet of paper trembling in his hands. The silence stretched, so thin it felt like the stained glass windows might crack. He finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper at first. Victor Hargrove, in a codicil added to his will just 3 weeks before his passing, acknowledged an additional heir. He swallowed. Elena Thompson, his biological daughter. A collective gasp ripped through the room. Heads whipped toward the back pew, toward me. Marcus shot to his feet, so fast the pew creaked. Lydia's handkerchief fell to the floor. Derek's mouth hung open like he'd been punched. The priest kept going, steadier now. Victor confirmed that Elena is the child of an affair he had many years ago. He has named her beneficiary of 60% of the estate, the primary residence, majority shares in Hargrove Enterprises, and several investment accounts. The remaining 40% is divided equally among Marcus, Lydia, and Derek. I felt the blood drain from my face, then rush back in hot waves. 60%. The house I'd only seen in photos. The company Dad built from nothing. All of it mine. They'd known. For months. Victor had told them privately after the codicil was drafted. That's why the cold stares. The back row command. They hadn't just wanted me out of sight. They'd wanted me erased before the truth could be spoken aloud. Lydia's voice cracked first. This is impossible. She's not. Marcus cut her off with a hissed, quiet, but his face was crimson, veins bulging. The priest looked directly at me again. Not with pity. With something closer to respect. Victor's final instruction was clear. The truth must be read publicly. No exceptions. I stood slowly, legs shaking but chin up. The entire church watched. And just when I thought the worst had passed, the priest's eyes widened at the last line on the page. He stopped dead. Because what Victor had written next wasn't about money at all. What does true chaos look like? It looks like a church full of black suits suddenly exploding into whispers, gasps, and one woman standing alone in the back row while her entire world flips upside down. The priest's voice broke the stunned silence. He finished the line they'd all been dreading. Victor's final personal request was that Elena Thompson receive not only the estate portion, but also his handwritten letters to her. Letters he asked to be read aloud today, in this moment, to prove his love and regret. He lifted a small sealed envelope from the podium. My name was written on it in Dad's familiar shaky script. Marcus lunged forward. This is outrageous. She can't. The priest raised a hand. Calm. Unshakable. The will is legal. The instructions are clear. Victor wanted no more secrets. Lydia collapsed back into the pew, face white. Derek buried his head in his hands. The rest of the congregation, neighbors, business associates, old friends, watched in stunned fascination. They hadn't come for a funeral. They'd stumbled into a reckoning. I walked down the aisle. Slow. Steady. Every eye followed. I reached the front, took the envelope from the priest's hand, opened it. Dad's words spilled out, simple, raw. Elena, I failed you. I let shame keep me silent. But you were never a mistake. You were my heart. Take what's yours. Live bigger than I ever did. Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't hide them. Not anymore. Marcus hissed at me. You ruined everything. I looked straight at him. No. You tried to hide me. Dad made sure you couldn't. The priest closed the Bible. The service was over. But the real fallout? That was just beginning. And what I did with the inheritance would make sure their secret stayed buried. No, wait, would make sure the truth stayed alive forever. So, what happens when the person they tried to erase becomes impossible to ignore? I stood there at the front of the church, Dad's letter trembling in my hand, tears finally falling freely. The priest stepped aside quietly. The organist never played the recessional. No one moved. The air was thick with the kind of silence that follows a bomb. Marcus, Lydia, and Derek stared at me like I'd stolen something that never belonged to them in the first place. But the truth was out. Dad had chosen. Not out of spite. Out of regret. Out of love he'd never been brave enough to show while he was alive. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I simply folded the letter, slipped it back into the envelope, and looked at them one last time. I came for goodbye, I said, voice steady. I'm leaving with everything he wanted me to have. I turned, walked back down the aisle alone. Heads followed me this time, not in judgment, but in awe. The back row girl had just become the center of the story. They forbade me from sitting with the family. But the priest didn't freeze out of fear. He froze because the truth finally won. Family isn't always the people who share your last name. Sometimes it's the courage it takes to claim the love they tried to hide. If you've ever been pushed to the edges of your own story, drop "I see you" in the comments right now. Smash that like if family secrets hit different. Subscribe if you want more raw, real stories that expose what people try to bury. Turn on notifications. Next twist drops soon. What's the biggest secret your family ever tried to keep from you? Tell me below. I read every single one.